Hello and welcome to News Laundry. We have with us today a very celebrated columnist and author, Vivek Kaul. Vivek writes regularly weekly columns for Equity Master as well as for a host of other publications, principally on the economy and the economic condition of India, which is what we're going to talk to him about today. Plus, he's also an author. Previously, he's written a trilogy called Easy Money, and I was one of the fortunate ones to have reviewed it. Today, we're going to be talking about, with Vivek, about his new book called India's Big Government. And as you can see, through the width of it, big by name, big by nature, it's a pretty fat book. But it is an absolutely astonishing account. If I can say, it starts off as a romance and ends as a tragedy. Vivek, welcome to News Laundry.
Thanks, Anand, for having me over.
So let me begin by saying, did you make sure that the size of this book is going to be as big as the name suggests?
No, actually, you know what happened was, I was supposed to write a book on real estate, which somehow never got going. And then I just started this sort of, I thought it will be a quickie, 2-3 mahine mein likh lenge. I mean, you know, and initially there were supposed to be some 5-6 chapters in it. And it was probably 1/3 or 1/4 of what it ultimately turned out to be. But as I started writing, I realized, the gravity and the breadth of the topic that I had taken on. I mean, and then, when you start digging, the book kept getting fatter and fatter and fatter. So
yeah,
that's
I mean,
how it.
What I found, I mean, when I went through it, and it took me days, if not a week or more than that. But I made a conscious effort not to hurry through it. And the reason for that is that you start off, I don't know whether it's a writer's thing or something, quite optimistic. But the ending and, the middle and from there, you kind of, I don't know whether it was conscious or not.
No, it
lost
wasn't.
Your optimism towards.
I don't think it was conscious. It was probably, as I kept writing, I sort of.
So that's the question. How long did it take for you to write this book? Because it kind of mirrors the economic progress or the lack thereof that we see in our country.
So, I mean, putting this book together took me around 9 months. Okay. But a lot of the material that is there in the book was not freshly written. Right. So, around 30-35% of the material I sort of took from my columns and, other than that, it took around 9 to 10 months to write it end to end, including the editing part. But I mean, I'm very fortunate that I have a great editor. So
right.
Otherwise, it would have easily taken around 18 months.
And the other thing to note is that it has been magnificently illustrated by Manjul.
Yes, I mean, thanks to him. I mean, he's a dear friend, and
so it's
and you wouldn't believe it. I mean, he made all these cartoons in less than 48 hours. So.
Did he? Oh my God!
Yeah. Other than the covers also by him.
That's
so
right.
The cover took more.
Yeah. So let's begin, Vivek, because we have quite a lot to cover through.
Sure.
What essentially do you mean by big government? Because let me just give the example of America. I mean, may not have as many ministries as we do, but there are a hell of a lot of people working for the federal government. Right. So when you say India has a big government, what exactly do you mean? I mean,
so this is, the first thing that needs to be clarified here is by big government, I do not mean a lot of people working for the government.
Right.
Because if you look at the Indian case, the ratio, the number of employees working for the central government to the total population is 1:668. Whereas in the American case, it is 1:139. So clearly, many more people are working for the, American government as a proportion of the population. In an Indian case, when you look at the central government, you also need to take into account the fact that the paramilitary forces, which is a huge number of people, also work for the central government. They come under the Ministry of Home Affairs.
Right.
Then there is the Department of Post. So if you take these individuals out, the number of people working for the Indian government is not very huge.
Particularly when you take into account the ratio, as you did.
Yes. And if you look at the central public sector enterprises, the employment has been falling. I mean, it has fallen from around 16 lakhs in 2005 to around 12 lakhs in 2015-16. The state government employment is close to around 72 lakhs, but this is This figure is from 2011-12, and it hasn't been, a new number hasn't come since then. So yes, so number of people working for the government is not what I mean by big government. What I mean
so
by
roughly we would, sorry to interrupt, would be about
so
1 crore people would be employed
by the
state
government.
and central.
A little more than that.
Yeah.
A little more than that. So for a population of around 130 crores, so which isn't very big if you compare.
But I mean, if you look at the population, that is the working population, not just the children and women.
So the working population, it would probably be if you assume a working population of around 65-70%, that would be close to around 80 crore.
Right.
So 1 crore out of 80 crore. So you can do the 1.5% probably is the right. So which isn't a very huge number.
What do you mean when you say big government?
So, there is, there are multiple points which go, which essentially define big government. And so I'll raise what I think are, the two most important. The first point of big government is, the government is into areas which it shouldn't be, and it is not in areas in which it should be. So topically,
okay, let me hold you right there. You mean to say that in India there are areas in which government should be there?
Yes.
Can you name those areas?
Yeah, but let me first explain where it shouldn't be. So then
I'll come as a shock. But anyway, yeah.
So if you look at, the best example right now is, since it's topical, is Air India. Mm-hmm. There is no reason for a government to be running an airline in this day and age. Okay. Now, what has Air India done? In the last, if you look at, from 2010-11, they have losses of close to 40,000 crore. Okay. Now, these losses are obviously being financed by the government. Right. Now,
by us, basically.
By us, by the taxpayer. And every rupee that goes into Air India obviously gets taken away from something else which is probably more important.
Loan waiver.
We'll come to that. Yeah. So anyway, so my point is, why should the government be operating, an airline in this day and age? And why just an airline? I mean, the government in India makes condoms. Close to where I live, there is something known in Mumbai, is something known as the Bicycle Corporation of India.
You wrote a piece.
Yeah, on that, there is. Then, recently I wrote a piece on this company called Hindustan Photo Films Manufacturing Company, which is a weird example wherein, you have around 218 people working for the company, and it had, in 2015-16, the losses were greater than 2,500 crore. So which means, the loss per employee is around 11.65 crore. I mean, this is bizarre. Wherein, all this money can be better spent. So what happens in cases of these, companies like Air India and Hindustan Photo Films, which, I don't know if you remember, they used to make these Hindu
Hindu films
once upon a time. So they, they don't make money. So what they do is, in order to survive, they have to take on more and more debt. So in case of Hindustan Photo Films, the debt is close to 23,000 crores. And
23,000 crores, that's about $4 billion.
In case of Air India, it's close to 52,000 crore. And the company is still going on. I mean, an interesting comparison to Air India is Kingfisher. The moment it got into trouble, it had to unravel and stop its operations within 1 year. But Air India, since it has the support of the taxpayer, keeps going on and on and on. So, and now they have reached a stage wherein even if they try to sell it, I'm not sure whether they'll find a buyer.
Distress sale or something. So, the reason why I wanted to concentrate on, the simplest of questions, the first up was that how much of, when you say India's big government, you're actually talking metaphorically?
To the sense that there is,
basically
there is no definition of the term big government, and I have sort of made up or come up with a definition of big government. So yes, it is.
In other words, if, let us say, assuming this is a completely hypothetical thing, and it has been shown, amply shown, that it can never be possible, but if public sector enterprises were as efficient as private sector enterprises, would you have a problem with India's big government?
No, so there is, as I said, there are multiple points which go into the definition of big government. So it's not just about the government operating public sector enterprises. See, the other point that I make is, about how, whenever a government tries to do something, it tries to do it at, theoretically it tries to do it at its best possible level. I mean, what we in simple terms would say, perfect is the enemy of the good.
Right.
Okay? So when they are designing a plan to implement, so it's like
first of all, I hate that phrase.
Okay.
That's like a get out clause,
Which phrase?
Perfect is the enemy of good.
Okay. So I mean, but that's cliches at times are necessary because they explain the thing in the best possible way. That is why they are cliches.
Right.
So. Yeah. So anyway, so the way to look at it is, it's like an inverted funnel. When a government is designing a plan, it has access to all the resources. At the central level, you have ministries which have bureaucrats. They have access to experts. They have access to research, and they design a plan. But by the time it comes to implementation, you have the same set of guys in the lower level bureaucracy working for the state governments who have to implement that plan.
Right.
So I mean I don't remember whether it was this economic survey or the last one which said that there are 900 schemes sponsored by the central government. Now imagine the guy who has to implement those schemes.
Right. So, well, we have a ministry called Ministry of Statistics and Program Implementation.
I know. So, but then. So that is, so they don't implement programs. They just check out whether programs are being implemented, which is a different thing.
Yes, of course, yeah.
Or how well the programs are being implemented.
And the other thing that came out from your book was that not many people know this, but in 1951, we had only 5 PSUs.
Yeah. So this is very, I mean, even I was sort of surprised. So there's this gentleman called Dwijendra Tripathi, who used to be a professor of business history at the IIM in Ahmedabad. And he wrote this brilliant book many years back called, which was titled The Oxford History of Indian Business. And while, I mean, I had read that book many years back and forgotten about it. And recently when I started rereading it, I came across this point. And I was very surprised because, generally the tendency in India is to, blame the British for the lot of the way we have evolved over the years, and which is true also in many areas, but at least when it comes to the mess in public sector enterprises, that wasn't handed to us by the British.
So are you saying Nehru isn't responsible for
so that the answer, the long answer, the short answer is no, the short answer is yes, and the long answer is no. Obviously, Nehru is responsible for it because he started the focus on development through public sector enterprises. And Nehru, along with a gentleman called P.C. Mahalanobis, who was the honorary statistical advisor to the government of India and who had a huge role to play in the second 5-year plan. After the second 5-year plan came to the fore, the setting up of public sector enterprises started. So that's one part. You also need to take into account the fact that India was coming out of 200 years of colonial rule. So it wasn't surprising that the government of the day wanted to do a lot of it itself and not be dependent on foreign capital. The third point here is that when Nehru became the Prime Minister, socialism was the in thing. In fact, there is a very interesting...
Was it just Nehru that actually was...
No, I'll give you a very interesting example here. Paul Samuelson, who was the first American economist to get a Nobel Prize, in the late 40s wrote a textbook on economics, which became the biggest selling economic textbook of all time. And in every edition of the book, he would have a year by which he expected the size of the Soviet economy to become bigger than the American economy. So the Americans were equally sold on the Soviet economy and the 5-year plans. Obviously, there was nothing in it. Data was being fudged at the end of the day. So Nehru fell for it initially. Then you also have to take into account the fact that in 1944, the biggest Indian private entrepreneurs got together to come up with something known as the Bombay Plan, in which they said that, as and when independence comes, the government will have to play a major role in economic development and the private sector will have to take a back seat. So Nehru was responsible for it, there is no denying it. But having said that, the major push towards public sector enterprises came only once Indira Gandhi came into the picture, and after 1969, 131 public sector enterprises were set up. And this is when, you know, the government got into everything. In fact, I mean, I remember as a kid in the late 80s, we used to even have a soft drink called Double 7, which was produced by the government.
It was a public sector. I didn't know that.
It was set up after George Fernandez kicked out Coca-Cola from India.
Yeah. I knew there was Campa Cola, but I didn't know. So, you know, there's another thing that I want to clear with you, which is that whenever I talk of public sector is absolutely scientifically untenable, you know, and also it's just ridiculous. People say, well, there are profit-making PSUs. Now, my theory is that, okay, PSU like Navratnas, you know, you can make profit, but how do you know if it was privatized, it would be making 100 times as much profit?
So the way to look at it is, so you look at...
So is a profit-making PSU acceptable to you, yes or no?
No. So profit-making at what cost? So what you do is you look at the return on capital employed.
Right.
And you know, every year the Ministry of Public Sector Enterprises produces an annual survey, and in which they have a graph, and the graph has you know, something known as return on capital employed, and you will see that the return on capital employed of PSUs since 2004-2005 has been falling. I mean, it used to be close to 12%, now it's close to 5%.
Right.
So which basically means that if the government, you know, the capital that it has put into the public sector business, were to put that money into fixed deposits, they would make more money. Yeah. So at the end of the day, net, public sector enterprises are not making enough. They don't justify.
So this is basically a misnomer. I mean, saying it's a you know, don't touch Navratnas because they're profit making.
So, but see, you know, which are the most profit making enterprises if you look at it? I mean, I'll give you a couple of examples. One is Coal India. Okay. My father worked in Coal India. My grandfather also worked in Coal India. So if you look at Coal India, now Coal India is not one company. There are some, you know, 7-8 subsidiaries each. One does not produce coal. The rest of them produce coal. So if you look at a couple of companies, one is called Northern Coalfields Limited, the other is Mahanadi Coalfields Limited. Their operating margins are magnificent. I mean, the last time it kind of checked their operating margins, they were anywhere between 35 to 40%. Now, why is that the case? Because coal can only be sort of dug up by public sector company, which is basically Coal India. I mean, private sector also can dig up coal, but that is only if they are consuming it themselves.
Right.
They cannot produce and sell it. So if you look at a lot of these companies, profitable,
they're all captive basically, right?
They basically have a monopoly in the business that they are.
Yeah.
So it's as simple. See, you look at all, you know, in 1991, many sectors were opened up for private competition. So look at the two biggest sectors. Look at banking and look at telecom. Now that gives you, you know, a clear picture of how well the private sector has done. I mean, the recent mess in telecom notwithstanding.
Yeah, exactly. I was about to
but
say
there
that.
are other reasons for that, and how well the private banks have done.
So there is absolutely no convincing argument for having a public sector unit.
No, I mean, as far as I go, no. I mean, see, the basic problem is that, you know, what happens in a public sector unit, there is separation of knowledge and power. You know, take the case of the mess in the banking industry, you know, as it prevails right now. Loans have been given to a lot of people, to a lot of corporates who are not, you know, repaying them. Now, I refuse to believe that the public sector guy commissioning those loans did not have the knowledge that this guy would either not repay, or two, he had pumped up his you know, costs and he was likely to siphon off a lot of money. I mean, it's very difficult to believe. Okay. Now, obviously he knew, but he also knew that if he wouldn't commission the loan, the crony capitalist could get him transferred to, you know, some place in the northeast. Where, I mean, and this is not to say that, you know, northeast is not a great place, but this is typically how an average Indian tends to think. So
and we know, I mean, during the emergency, even before that, Sanjay Gandhi used to actually,
So what happens is, in the public sector, people have the knowledge, but they don't have the power to make that decision.
Now, Jaggi suggested something quite interesting.
Okay.
which garnered a lot of controversy. He said that maybe one stopgap solution towards eradicating the public sector units was to have these management
buyouts.
Yes, yeah, or you'll have some external managers who would manage that. Things would go on in the 70s. He said we would have an independent managing agencies. That was the term that he used.
See, the problem there
Can that really work?
The problem there is, look at a company like Air India. Okay, now you might get in fact, it's been tried before at Air India, wherein you can get a professional manager.
Right.
But ultimately, the people down the line tend to remain the same. You can't replace the entire company. The only way of replacing the entire company is to privatize it.
So NITI has asked for the privatization of, Niti Aayog has asked for privatization of Air India. Do you think if the government does not listen to it, Niti Aayog chairman should resign? Like you had Elon Musk resigning from...
No, why would he do that? He has a cushy job.
Right.
And he's relevant here.
So that's the question. When you suggest something and the government turns a blind eye, what is to be done?
No, but see, the point is, people who are
and it takes a long, sorry to interrupt, it takes a long time for one to understand that the government is least bothered about, as Narendra Modi's slogan was, the government has no business to be in business. And then now suddenly we find that the only business of the government is
to be in business.
There is zero accountability. And then you understand, and I take you back to a recent example where the government celebrated 3 years of the
in fact, there is some
they
survey.
Held a function in Ashok Hotel.
There is some survey going around today which says that the biggest brands in India are now all government brands.
Is that right? So who is in a country where you cannot hold people accountable? What is the solution? Should it just carry on? Because
obviously carrying on is not the right thing. But having said that, this is just to clarify the Arvind Panagaria point.
Yeah.
Now, people who are in positions where they have to give ideas, their job is to give ideas. There is not much more they can do beyond that. And as long as they're giving good ideas, even if they're not implemented, I think they should continue to give good ideas, because there is some chance that maybe someone might listen to them.
Mm-hmm.
So that is extremely important, which is true about the chief economic advisor, Arvind Subramanian as well. If you've read the economic survey carefully, I think he was one of the few people who actually criticized demonetization, though he didn't do it directly in a very roundabout, safe way. But at least kudos to him for sort of saying as much as he did. What was your last question? I forgot.
No, it was what is the solution when you have zero accountability? Everyone knows the examples about Air India, about the hotels and all sorts of things. You talked about the National Cycle, I don't know what the
Bicycle Corporation.
Bicycle Corporation. There was HMT. I don't know whether it's been disbanded or not. These things go on. It's not. People were criticizing the Congress government, and you can criticize Indira Gandhi and Nehru for starting this and continuing with this, but at some point or the other,
it has to stop.
It has to stop.
No,
the point is, it doesn't stop.
So what I'll do is I'll read out something
please.
Which Narasimha Rao, of all the people, said in the late 90s. Let me see if I can, in the early 90s, not in the late 90s, if I can find it. So this was something that Rao said sometime at the 79th Congress plenary at Tirupati in 1992.
This was immediately after the economic
reforms. And he said, we have invested over 1 lakh crore of rupees in the public sector so far. The returns therefrom on the whole have been very meager. All this is the people's money, no one else's. The present situation is that the government can no longer collect any more money from the people for further fresh investment in the public sector. Okay. No,
this is what he's saying.
This is 25 years back, and much more money has been collected since then. Then he goes on to say, what exactly is the public sector? It is in fact a sector owned by the state, run with the money belonging to the people. The profits and losses of the public sector, therefore, are the profits and losses of the people. Now, this is one part. The other part is, which is again something that I discuss in my book, and which Rao says very, very clearly. At the moment, the state has overstretched its meager resources and is seeking to do many things at the same time. As a result, it is unable to do anything adequately. Now, these are extremely profound words which have been said, more or less 25 years back, but up until now, nobody has really paid.
And if you add what Rajiv Gandhi said about famously or infamously about 15 paisa for every rupee,
which is
the point is people can keep on saying these things. Nothing changes.
So yeah, I mean, which is the whole thing, ultimately, I mean, either, people don't understand these things, or, every time a new leader comes along, they feel that, this is the guy who will bring in change. Because, inherently, if you have to survive in a country like India, you cannot be pessimistic.
Yeah.
Right. So.
Really?
Yeah. I mean, if.
Now, the other myth, I would call it myth, that has been demolished was that many people were saying that Modi is pro-development. And of course, his coming in 2014 had a lot to do with anti-incumbency as well. I mean, the UPA was a disaster.
Inflation.
But many people said Modi would not outright sell the PSUs. He would first make them profitable, like he's been doing in Gujarat, and then sell them. Now, obviously, that is a myth because that hasn't happened at all. In fact, if you look at NDA 1's NDA 1, the deregulation or whatever you may call it, disinvestment thing, it was much, much more than NDA 2's. In fact, NDA 2's is only disinvestment in the shares. And you were talking about Coal India. I mean, so they sold Coal India shares, and who bought it? LIC. So, all this perfidy is going on.
So that's something that I guess, NDA 2 has learned from P. Chidambaram, who sort of started it. And I mean, genuine disinvestment, what the government calls strategic, sale,
was
happened only under Arun
Shah.
I mean, when he sold off, Modern Reds and all
the
these hotels and he faced so much, resistance in doing so. So basically, the point I guess is that nobody wants to sort of take panga against the trade unions. So I mean, I'll give you the example of, Hindustan Photo Films. It's a very interesting story in itself because every year employees retire. Okay. So if you look at the chart, I get a feeling they're just waiting for all the employees to retire so that they can shut down the company. Now the point is, there are just 218 people.
Yeah.
If you cannot tackle 218 people,
how
are you running a nation? Yeah. So, and this is true not only for Narendra Modi, it's also true for, people who ran governments
now
before
you see, one thing that came out very clearly in your book is how nicely you tie it with the other gargantuan problem we are going to face, which is jobs. Now, when you cannot, relieve 218 people who are sitting on a job, who are taking the money, taxpayers' money, how on earth are you going to give employment, as you say, to about 1 crore new people wanting jobs in India? Explain that to me.
So, this is something
on the face of it, I would say that's criminal.
Yes. In fact, I mean, so, when I started sort of writing about jobs around 1.5 years back, I mean, I used to get, a lot of hate on the social media now, but now 1.5 years later, everybody is talking about jobs. In fact, Mr. Modi is supposed to have a discussion on jobs this Sunday. I mean, there was a brief item in the Times of India today. So, just to give you some background, there are various, estimates which are made, and most of these estimates suggest that anywhere around 12 to 15 million individuals are entering the workforce every year in India, which basically means 1 million a month if we were to take a ballpark figure. So 1 million Indians are entering the workforce every month. Now, there is a very interesting, assumption behind this estimate, and the assumption is that when they came up, when this number is calculated, it is assumed that women will continue to enter the workforce at the same rate as they are now. Now, which is a very, I mean, I wouldn't say stupid, but it's a very weak assumption because world over it has been seen, as women get educated and the country progresses, more and more women enter the workforce. So this 1 million per month number may turn out to be a massive underestimation. That's one point. The second point here is that what has happened is that between 2005 and 2015, we have had around, I mean, and this is an estimate which has been made, around 10 crore people who have gone through, you know, India's education system and who can barely read, write, or do some basic math. So, you know, so they are in that sense totally unemployable.
Right.
Now, if you need to employ those people, you need jobs at the low end. You need low-skilled jobs.
Manrega kind of a...
No, Manrega is a dole. I'm talking about...
No, I mean, I meant was the kind of jobs that Manrega encourages.
Not really. Manrega is a dole. I mean, let's not go there. I mean, it's not so... I mean, so you need... So basically, you know, when people move from agriculture, let's say, I mean, to construction, sorry, to any other job, they tend to move towards jobs towards construction, low-end jobs in construction. But right now the problem is that companies are not expanding because they are you know, over leveraged. The government is carrying out a lot of construction programs, but the government at the end of the day has a limitation of the amount of money it can spend. And the real estate sector is in a limbo. Now, if these jobs are to be created for, you know, the low end, the low skilled people, you need the real estate sector to start you know, working itself up again. And that will only happen once the prices come down to a level wherein people can actually afford to, you know,
But did they after demonetization?
I mean, there has been some impact, but it still needs to come down a lot. The other point I wanted to make was, and this is, you know, something that gets thrown back at me, you know, often, so I think, you know, I need to clarify it, is that, you know, people tend to suggest that the rate of unemployment in India is just 5%. Now, 5% unemployment is like, you know, brilliant. You know, 95% people are working. So what is the problem? You know? Now, the problem again is, you know, if you look at the way this unemployment is measured, it is extremely flawed. So there are two methods. You know, in one method, what they do is this, you know, they see how many people were working for 183 or more days in the past 1 year. Okay. So you could have been not working for 182 days and still be employed. Okay. In the books of the government. The other method is, you know, even better, where it says that if you were working for 30 or more days in the past 1 year, you are categorized as employed. So as per the first method, the rate of unemployment is 5%. As per the second method, the rate of unemployment is just 3.7%.
Right.
So now, in fact, the people who do these surveys, the Labour Bureau, comes up with another data, which is most important, but which never gets cited anywhere. And which is that how many people looking for a job for 12 months in a year get a job for 12 months in a year. And that ratio, that percentage is only 60%. It is 82% in urban India and around 52-53% in rural India. So half of rural India doesn't have a job all through the year. So India's problem is not unemployment, it is extreme underemployment, or what is known as disguised unemployment in agriculture.
Now, there are three questions I want to ask before I forget all three of them. One was, a recent phrase was introduced to me by Professor Vivek Debroy called voluntary unemployment. What the hell does that mean?
Okay, so I don't know, I mean, in what context he used it, but what I think what that basically means is that people opting out of employment.
Yes.
So I can, you know, what happens is...
And he said it's growing.
It's growing. So what, you know, I can give you an example in the US-American context. So America has 6 rates of unemployment, okay? And each one of them has its own definition. So there the rate of unemployment has been coming down dramatically since 2009-2010 when it peaked. But what is also happening is that a lot of people who have been looking for jobs and have not been able to find jobs are opting out of the workforce. So when your denominator is falling, you know, the total labor force is falling, you know, when your denominator is falling, that leads to the rate of unemployment coming down as well. So, so which I think was the context in which Professor Debroy used it. So.
And the other thing which is directly related to, I mean, the jobs or the lack of it, the controversy was that I recently heard Amitabh Kant, who is the CEO of Niti Aayog, and he was asked a question, I think, by Shekhar Gupta in his interview, that, and in fact, a lot of people have also written that, you know, where are the jobs, where are the jobs? And he said, I do not trust the Labour Board numbers. Look at because those are 2014, 2015 numbers and they're very erroneous. We will know the exact number or the truer picture of the number of people employed in India only by end 2018. What we are going by presently is the number of mudra loans that we have given.
I mean, that's a very shady way of...
explain that to me. I mean, how is that shady? When the government is saying that we have disbursed 7 crores...
See, what they do is they assume that, so these many, people have got loans, and so because these many people have got loans,
that means
they have created these many jobs.
Yeah.
I mean,
but what do you find wrong in that?
No, I mean, where is the survey? It is just someone sitting in a room and coming up with a number. Yeah, I mean, how do you believe something like that?
But I mean, let's play a devil's advocate in the sense, for the government here, let's say 7 crore people have been given loans to start their businesses. Out of 7 crores, what would be your estimate as to the number of employment that they have generated? Difficult to say.
I cannot.
So you'd rather believe on 2014 labor numbers than this? I mean, there's a dilemma here.
I'll tell you something. Yeah. There are two things. When I don't know what Amitabh Kant talked about. The Labour Bureau numbers that I was referring to is not the quarterly survey that they carry out, which is suspect, which I also agree with him. When they say 20,000 jobs went down or 1 lakh jobs went up, it's a very small sample, limited to 8 sectors. So that part, I agree with him. But what I was referring to is an annual survey which they carried out, and in which case the sample size is quite large.
But he did not believe, if I'm not mistaken, even the annual survey, he was saying the results, I mean the survey that he would rather believe in, the results would come out in 2018. So clearly he's not...
if the government doesn't buy its own numbers, there is nothing, you and me can do about it.
That's the question. So in fact, on one hand, we have this labour survey, which the government is not believing. And on the other hand, we have the government saying we have disbursed loans to 7 crore people out of a working population. So that's pretty good, actually. I would say if the working population is 60 crores, so 10%.
10%, yeah.
Okay. Which the public is not believing. So the government is not believing, the public is not.
No, my thing is you cannot just, kind of assume, jobs have been created on the basis of, lending having been carried out. I mean, there has to be a little more method to it than just that.
Right. Okay. So, let me quote what you say about labour reforms here, because I think that's quite important. That's tied.
What page is this? Because I may also have forgotten what I
No, it's fresh because I just read it yesterday night. This is 314, page 314.
Okay.
And in fact, this is intrinsically tied to the discussion that we've been having here. You say one reason why labour reforms have never happened in India is because of the reluctance of successive governments to take on the trade unions.
Right.
An excellent example of this is when Atal Bihari Vajpayee government tried in 2002 to change the Industrial Disputes Act. It tried to increase the limit from 100 to 1,000 workers, beyond which a firm looking to retrench or lay off workers had to approach the government for permission.
Right.
At the same time, it proposed to increase the severance package from the prevailing 15 days to 45 days of salary for each year worked. The trade unions opposed this and it never made its way through. So we are talking of 2002.
Right.
Where the hell are the labour reforms, Vivek?
So the labour reforms have still not happened, and an interesting data point is that an average Indian small and medium enterprise employs around 2.2 individuals, which in itself tells you that an average Indian business firm is very, very small. Now, why is it small? It is small because the moment it has to grow big, so many of these laws and regulations.
The Trade Unions Act of 1926 was modified only in 2001.
Yeah. So, so they need to follow so many of these rules and regulations that it just doesn't make any sense for them to scale up. And I mean, this is a point that Jagdish Bhagwati and Arvind Panagaria also make in their book, India's Tryst with Destiny. And so that's that. And it's not just, labor reforms. I mean, there are other things as well. I mean, the National Manufacturing Policy of 2011, in fact, came up with some data which said that an average, small business has to follow some 100-odd regulations. So it's just not possible. At any point of time, you might be breaking some law without even realizing it.
So can I suggest something diabolical here?
Yeah.
Which is, I was noticing Kerala's GDP numbers. 1/4 of it is actually through remittances.
Right.
Maybe that's the only damn solution.
So you mean
You
we
have-
should all
you
go
have
abroad and send back money here?
I mean, what do you think? Because
No,
you
I mean,
have
that's
zero
not-
labor reforms, you have no employment policy. In fact, you have assessment which is indirect, saying that we've disbursed these loans. You have number of PSUs that haven't gone down. There is no disinvestment. All right. On top of that, we had demonetization. I don't know, but I mean, the Skill India has been disbanded. I don't know how well the Make in
Which
India
is
is
very,
doing,
I
which-
think that was very, I mean, that was one of the things that I sort of really liked. In the sense that, since independence, the focus on, the government sort of tried to create low-end skill through the ITIs, and it failed miserably. Now, in the last few years, the private sector got involved, and some activity started to happen on that front.
But
they have
said,
scaled down.
Look
That's
at
fine.
the target, 500 million.
No, but then I have explained that in this book, and I mean I did not say that directly, but the numbers looked very, very unbelievable, because see, you cannot see what is the basic
And I was
problem
actually,
there?
I mean, after reading this, I was trying to calculate the working age population of India. I mean, it's of course the census figures 2011, but from I think 20 to 60, there are about 630 million Indians.
Right.
All right, and they plan to skill 500 million Indians.
So what's
Of
the
course,
basic?
I mean,
the basic
2022,
problem
but-
there. The basic problem.
So who
there
is choosing these targets? Matlab ye-
So see, the targets are always
This is
stretched.
But I mean, this is beyond stretching.
Yeah. So
This is ridiculous.
So see, the point is, the first point here is that somebody, whoever came up with that number should have first thought that, okay, you have this number, but where the hell will we get people to train
Yes.
those people, right? I mean, you need trainers to train those trainers
course,
also. So,
yeah.
I mean, it's bizarre.
I mean, because we're running out of time, Vivek, so just a couple of more questions. You talked about, in fact, you explained why, let me quote you out here, upper castes like Jats in Haryana, Patels in Gujarat, Marathas in Maharashtra, and Kapus in Andhra Pradesh, they want reservations in government jobs.
Yeah.
Now, that is another disaster waiting to happen, already happened. What the hell is going on? As it is, we have, very few jobs. Now, if your take on this.
So there are 2 points. The first point is that you have 50% of the population working in agriculture, and they produce around 14 to 15% of the GDP. So it doesn't take rocket science to conclude that agriculture is no longer as viable a proposition as it used to be. So you need to move people out of agriculture. The second thing that has happened is that
In fact, people want to move out of agriculture.
people want to move out of agriculture.
It's not just the government incentivizing.
So the second thing that has happened over the years is that as generations have gone on and land has been divided, the size of the average plot on which agriculture is carried out has fallen. Okay, so in 70s it used to be somewhere around 2.7 hectares. Now it's around, as per the agriculture census of 2010-11. I mean, it's a very old number. It was around 1.16 hectares. So on those plot sizes, and this is average across India. Now, if you look at states like Bihar and Kerala, the average is even lower, less than 0.5, 0.6 hectares. So at those plot sizes, agriculture simply is not viable enough. So, you had these landowning castes who probably were not farming themselves, but they were making money out of farming. But now, given the fact that this plot of, the plot sizes have fallen so much, they are no longer making as much money as they could. At the same time, so now they want, government jobs, and they want reservation in government jobs. The problem is that the government isn't really creating any jobs. So I sort of checked out the numbers for the Haryana government. And very, very interestingly, the Haryana government over the last 10 years has, every year the rate of job creation has increased by around 0.5%.
Right.
And the population has grown at around 1.8%. So what it simply means is that, if anywhere to think through, any of these leaders who, run these agitations were to think through this properly, it just doesn't make any sense in asking for reservation in government jobs.
Which brings me to the question, because
So the diabolical thing
Yes.
to say here is that what they need to ask for is reservation in private sector jobs.
I was going to ask you that, because as you know, we have this reigning loan waivers, right? Which was started by, I don't know, maybe UP, of course, did it famously. 60,000 crore was waived off.
36.
Was it only 36? Okay, right. I thought I've seen some posters where they said 60,000 crores UP. Okay, 36,000 crores.
And now Maharashtra has.
No, I'm talking of UPA, not UP. UPA.
UPA.
Yeah.
They did 70,000.
70,000, yeah. 70,000 crores. And then UP, Maharashtra, Chhattisgarh, Rajasthan is going to follow suit. Okay. Punjab, right? So this is going, in fact, there's a report that says it's going to set the government back by 2.5 lakh crores.
It's possible, yeah.
Right? Now, of course, they're going to do it. They cannot not do it because they want to win. The diabolical question which I want your answer is that, of course, people will sooner or later realize that, look, there's no point hankering or asking for reservations in public sector jobs. We demand reservations in private sector jobs. So, A, are you for it? And B, do you think that's viable?
No, I mean, I would say, I mean, I'm not for reservations of any form. No.
In any form?
No.
Like Arun Shourie then?
Yes. I mean, I don't think, I mean, there are other ways through which, this needs to be tackled, but reservation is not really the way to go about it.
But let me put to you that 65% of the private sector economy is actually manufacturing. So if the original objective of Dr. Ambedkar was that we have to, lift up the class that was actually discriminated against, and if we want, that section of society to improve monetarily or living standards, then don't you think public sector employment for a limited period, private sector jobs for a limited reservations actually makes much more sense?
But see, the point again is, when Ambedkar originally envisaged it, he also
said limited,
limited sort of never.
No politician has the courage to say we're going to have.
So which will, I mean, if ever private sector reservation happens, it will go along similar lines. And I mean,
but how soon a politician would come along and say, well, let's do it?
So if you,
I do not foresee an objection to that from the political class.
So a good analogy to this, a good example, sort of simple, similar example would be, politicians in Karnataka are now already talking about labor unions in IT companies.
Right.
So sooner rather than later, this will also get picked up. Now, what will happen is, I think how the private companies will tackle it at some level is by sort of trying to show, and at least in manufacturing it would be true to some extent, that they already are employing people, from, the reserved section of the society. So, I mean, this is not this is a debate we should be having some other day and some other time.
Okay.
So,
yeah. You also briefly mentioned about the devastating impact of black money on the economy. Why have you tied it to the big government, if I may ask? Because that's something that, I did not understand how, big.
So see, what happens is, when so one of the,
Are you talking about crony capitalism? Are you talking about?
No. What I'm basically, why I tied it to big government was primarily because, when black money gets generated, tax does not get paid, and when tax does not get paid by a certain section of the society, the government ends up taxing the section of the society which pays taxes at a higher rate. Okay. Or they come up with other ways of sort of taxing people. I mean, look at service tax. When it was introduced, it was at 4%. Now it is at 15%. With GST, it will be at 18%.
Right.
So, when a certain section of the society does not pay tax, the government needs to tax people who are already paying tax. So that was my...
Which is the middle class.
Which is the middle class. So that was why I linked it to the big government. And also, you need to remember that, in the 70s and in the 60s, tax rates were very, very high. There's this great story about J.R.D. Tata, who, during, one particular, I think in the mid 70s, when the highest rate of income tax was 97.75%.
Yes.
And there was wealth tax. So, his entire income went towards paying taxes, and then he had to sell some assets every year to sort of pay, the remaining taxes. So that was why I included that in big government. You know, because the tax rates were so high, you know, once upon a time, a large section of the population developed this habit of not paying taxes, and they continue to do so. You know, despite the many efforts on part of the government. So yeah.
So it's about 3%, 2.5% of.
I mean, 3 to 5% is
people who pay taxes. Yeah. Now there's one. Sorry, last couple of questions. One thing that we haven't discussed at all, as you would have guessed, was the public sector banks.
Which are now insisting on Aadhaar card.
Which are now, in fact, yes, they are now insisting on, and if I may say so, my bank account has been closed because I did not provide the Aadhaar card. So, yeah, that's that. Where do we go from here? I mean, this is a disaster.
So it's getting, and the tragedy is...
I mean, if you look at the NPAs, they're actually shooting up more than...
Yeah, and now, you know, up until now, it was only the crony capitalists. Now we have, you know, telecom debt.
Yes.
Which can go bad because, you know, suddenly you have this one, you know, new player who has really... Jio, who's really shattered the business model.
In fact, Andy Mukherjee's piece of yesterday was talking of 4 lakh crores.
Okay, I mean, I didn't read it. So yeah, I mean, so you have this new, you know, the telecom, you know, debt also, the chances of it not being repaid. So this is a huge.
मतलब देश चल कैसे रहा है? आप बताएं.
हाँ, वो मुझे पता होता तो बस चल रहा है.
चल रहा है. Vivek, it was an absolute pleasure talking to you. And the final question is, do you foresee a sequel to your, or you know, the part 2 of your book, which would be thinner than this? Do you see any improvement in the...
So, I mean, I don't know. I mean, I might write, I don't think I'll write a sequel to this because it will get too boring for me to write. And the problem is that, you know, this book is so number driven that, you know, if I were to write a sequel, I would have to look up for all those numbers all over again.
Right.
Which is not I don't want to do that. So, yeah.
Anyway, a pleasure talking to you, Vivek.
Same, yeah. Anand, thank you.
Thank you so much. So, I hope you enjoyed this interview with Vivek Kaul. Remember, when the public pays, the public is served, and when the corporations pay, the corporations are served. Therefore, pay to keep news free. Thank you.